This is being recorded to the cloud. And this is officially week 12A, or is that right? Yeah, 12A, because we did 12B on Monday with James Klein. We did the part on jobs and competencies and skills early, because that's when we could arrange this. And Amy is real, how should I say? I'm delighted to have her come in during this point of the semester, where she's probably got a lot of other things to do. And so we're blessed to have her presence here to explain why she hit the road into social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field of learning, design, and technology, or IST, or whatever you want to call this field. And that's one of the questions. I have actually 11 questions for you, Amy, but I think Claudia will probably have many more pertinent ones than what I do. So I'm not going to ask a lot of them. I'm going to ask a couple to start with, then I'll go to Claudio, Kevin, and Aaron, and anyone else who shows up along the way. And then we'll come back to my questions. But we do have this article from you for this week. So I think it's important that you give us the cliff notes, because the students are working on final assignments and they might not actually read all the articles cover to cover, but they might want to read the cliff notes. So the article for this week is Reconsidering the Instructional Design and Technology Timeline Through the Lens of Social Justice, which was in Tech Trends in 2018. And I think I had an article in the same issue, or one of those. And that's how I glanced upon it. I was taking a copy of mine. I saw, oh, this is really interesting. I could include this article in my 511 class. And then last year, my students said, oh, it is an interesting article. You actually should bring her in. That was their recommendation. I at the end, during course evals, I asked one question that relates to this guest appearances. And I think 2 or 3 students said you. Well, why were they saying I should bring you in, Amy? And what's this article all about?
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. And let me just start by saying, hi, everybody. I'm glad you're either here now with us or that you'll be tuning in later. I'm delighted to be joining you all. This article came about, there's so many different starting points, so I'll just jump in on one of them. In about 2013-14, I hit a point where I couldn't deny the need to directly name and look at what I was perceiving as a lack in the field, a serious look at equity, inclusion, belonging, justice. And I had been grappling for, ever since I was a doc student at Arizona State in the 90s, with how do we in this field pursue justice-oriented things. I may not have used that language at the time. So early on, I would use the outlets that are pretty typical in our field, like digital divide or ethics or professional responsibilities. And it wasn't scratching that itch. It wasn't getting directly enough to what I needed to do. So actually in maybe the early 2010s-ish, early in that decade, I was really to the point of thinking, I just don't know if I can pursue what I want to pursue in this field if there's not, more room for more serious looking at how we should be dealing with equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I kind of decided I'm either going to start thinking about departing and going to another field, or I'm going to have to figure out a way to do it in this field of instructional technology, whatever we're calling it. Yeah. So I somewhat trepidatiously in 2014 proposed for AECT conference a session, and I don't know if I'll get the name right, something about why the field of IDT must acknowledge and address issues of race, ethnicity, and social justice, something like that. And the day that I gave was there to give the session. I was really nervous because I thought people might not like that I'm calling out all of us in our field for not doing an adequate job on this and needing to shift directions. And it didn't take long. I mean, by the time my session was over, I realized that of course people self-select to which sessions they're going to attend at a conference. So the people who attended that session were actually people who have been hungering for these topics to be openly addressed in our field as well. And there are a lot of people who were hungry for how to do this and not sure how to do it or not sure who else might be working on it. So this article directly relates to that session that I gave in 2014. And a few people who are at that session would periodically bug me and say, let me have your copy of your session. Will you share your slides? Will you share your talking points? Are you going to publish that thing? I'd really like to share it with my students. I'm like, yeah, I should. Yeah, I really should. And then I had an opportunity to guest edit a special issue on culture, learning, and technology in the Tech Trends. And again, another colleague said, you really ought to put that an article based on the work that you did in that 2014 presentation in it. And I'm like, that's a great idea. So I threw it together, and as it says at the beginning of the article, this is a chance to develop some of the ideas a little further and to make it more available for a wider audience. So that's one take on how this article came about.
Yeah, I did a presidential session in Kansas City on systematic reviews of the research, and then we got co-opted into doing a special issue of ETR&D, and then we did another presidential session based on that last year, wherever that was, in Las Vegas maybe, based on that special. And it was virtual. We were virtual last year, weren't we? We didn't meet face to face. And then this year, there are a couple of sessions related to systematic reviews of the research, and our Florence Martin and Vanessa Dennin and I got involved in one of them. We added to the issue, and now they're trying to twist my arm to do another special issue, which is another story. But before we go into this further and deeper, you were in Arizona State, in the 1990s. Approximately what years were you there?
This is a good question, because I studied at 1, 2, 3, I don't know, like 5 different institutions, but I ended up getting all 3 degrees at Arizona State. So I finished my undergrad there. I got, which was actually in journalism and public programs. And then I got a master's degree in educational media and computers. And then I thought I was going to work as an instructional designer and a consultant, and I did that for a bit. But I ended up doing the PhD in a curriculum and instruction division, which blended what was at the time an instructional technology focused program with a more ed psych program, which James Klein was there at the time, and Willie Savigny and Howard Sullivan and others, along with the Marina McIsaac, Gary
Cole Havey.
Yes.
Cole Havey.
Oh yes, Cole Havey for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so at the time, in order to get the whole blending of all of those, you had to be through this interdisciplinary division of curriculum and instruction. And then since that time, one of the reasons I came to OU was because when I came here in '98, they had already just blended their ed tech and their ed psych toward the effort of having people use the technologies and tools and ways of thinking, along with the theoretical and conceptual grounding in ed psych.
Yeah, well, Cole Havey sent us 2 of his students early 2000s when he was dying of cancer, but then he recovered a bit, and then he ended up getting it was in remission, but then it relapsed. Unfortunately, he was a very famous guy. There were many famous folks at Arizona State. Gene Glass as well in statistics. So I interviewed at Arizona State in '98. I was offered the job to run their teaching and learning centers. I told James Klein on Monday. He actually showed me around the unit, because I would have had a foot or a faculty line maybe in with him. Mm-hmm. And then the building for teaching and learning that they were going to build for $30 million never got built. So it was a good thing I didn't leave. But I was having a problem with tenure. And I got tenure for teaching, but they didn't know how to review someone who got tenure for teaching. Mm-hmm. And right after I got tenure for teaching, I could say no to some things. My research took off, lo and behold. And so yeah, it was good. past week to get recognized for my research with the
Congratulations.
Jonathan's Award,
That's
because there's
wonderful. Happy to see that.
yeah, it was really timely for me, because sometimes I'm kind of invisible in my own department. Let's just put it that way, because I come from Ed Psych. So I'm an Ed Psych into IST, and all the students here can close their ears. That IST people are very protective of IST people. And all my colleagues have retired or left. I have nobody, other than the dean, who's my friend, who I've helped hire. I have nobody in the School of Ed really supporting or watching out for me. So this award was particularly important because I'm no longer invisible. So actually, again, people can close their ears. I've actually applied for a couple jobs, and you know, I'm open to leaving IU. So yeah, but things are going to turn around. Things are going to become great. It's going to be fantastic. I'll probably end up staying here. So I've been here 30 years, which is a long time.
It is indeed.
You know, so anyways, my little honest sermon there, I applied to Arizona State because they didn't know what to do with a guy going in for tenure in teaching, and they totally screwed up my file and never had any reviews of my teaching. And so within a couple of weeks' time, they had to quickly ramp up and get reviews of my teaching. In the interim, so I was turned down by the provost. In the interim, they ended up getting those, but there was a job at Ohio State and one at Arizona State, and I interviewed for both and offered at Arizona State. And my daughter wanted to go. She wanted a swimming pool. And I could have been your advice. No, I would have been too late. I would have been right around when you
graduated. I left in
graduated.
97, actually.
Yeah, so I would have been too late. It was 98 probably is when it was. So anyways, Arizona State's a wonderful place, but then they, as James Klein pointed out on Monday, they lost the entire School of Ed during the Great Recession. And it's never really recovered.
Right.
I don't know if you know Jim Middleton in math ed there, but he was a close colleague of mine. He helped me with my dissertation. And so, yeah, and I know Punya Mishra is there now. He's got a podcast show and all. So let's see, let's go back. So all 3 degrees, I was going to ask you what your undergrad was in. So it was in journalism, then you media studies, then you CNI, ed psych, and tech, everything as a PhD student. It's kind of like Harvard. And
yeah, and I before I settled on my undergrad, I switched majors several times too. So I mean, I love learning stuff, and so I've dabbled all over the place. And one of the reasons the Ed Media and Computers Masters was interesting for me was because I saw it as a place where I could combine my love of communication, visuals, art, and creativity in a way that is socially responsible, hopefully, not necessarily, but.
So you found that creative intersection. So James talked about, for him, the creative intersection was communications, psychology, and education. And then I added in technology. For me, it was technology business, because I'm an accountant. Technology business, psychology, and education. For you, it's journalism?
Well, journalism was also the communication thing. So communication, visuals. As a kid, I always thought I was going to grow up to be an artist. And so that's actually how I learned about the Ed Media and Computers program. I was hired on as a graphics artist at the research center affiliated with that department at that time. So
you've been I noticed in some of your articles that this is not the only thing you've been doing in terms of cultural related articles and diversity, equity, inclusion things. What does how can our field better link or more appropriately do research within the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What can we provide? What can we offer to others, whether it's interdisciplinary in nature or it's Lone Ranger projects? What can we do?
I'm really glad you're asking this question, because it's kind of a messy one to grapple with. And I can share what part of my approach has been, which isn't to say that's a template others should necessarily follow, but it has been helpful for me. My perspective on this is that if we enter it with only saying, what do we have to offer and how do we do this, we may be missing out on what do we need, in addition to what do we provide others, but what do we need for ourselves? So, for example, if you're thinking about transformative learning, we don't just go in there to transform others as if we're the agents operating on other people who just passively take what we do to them, and we're in no need of openness or reflection or interrogation of ourselves, but to be thinking about what do I need to learn, and how do I need to cultivate critical humility in my own approach to learning and engagement and partnerships, so that I can provide something that is useful while also learning myself. So it's not like there's not a template that exists for how to do DEI work appropriately. There are guides and there are supports and there are models and methods, but I think that there are tendencies in our field which work against us, and if we're not questioning what the dominant tendencies in our field are, we may miss out on some opportunities to question them, and how is the dominant tendency in my field driving my decisions and keeping me from being aware of other opportunities and other decisions that I might make. And I don't know if this has made any sense to that point yet, but I do want to add that another way of many strands of how I got to this place, I became an executive committee member of the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies at OU. And that's the parent organization of the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in American Higher Education, which is one of the, if not the prominent professional annual conference on diversity, equity, inclusion issues. And that service opportunity provided me since 2006 the opportunity to be very well engaged with the center and with that conference almost every single year since then. So through a service effort, I was able to learn invaluable information and opportunities for experience and engagement and learning that I can't put a value on. It's beyond any value. If I had just gone to learn some things, or if I had just gone to read a few articles, or maybe interview a couple of people, I wouldn't have had nearly the depth of engagement and opportunity to have conversations, to learn things, to find out what some of my blind spots are. I'm still trying to learn, what more of my blind spots are, but to be thinking about not only what I have potentially to offer, but what do I have to learn from other fields, not just other people, but other domains, other ontological perspectives, right? That maybe can help me think about my own field and my own work in my own field differently.
Yeah, this leads to two areas of discussion possibly. One is to think about your inroads into this field was in a service variety and then expanded from that, right? But it also could be within your own teaching, it could be within your own research, and it can be representative of every day-to-day interactions, no matter who you're with or what you're doing. Because I raise this because all of us in the field of whatever we call it, design, learning and technology, or instructional technology, are having conversations with our peers or with our department or with our unit or college or universities at the faculty level. Now at the student level, they're being asked to, when they're applying for jobs, to include a diversity statement or diversity, equity, and inclusion statement in there. And I think in part, you could help us think about what goes into such a statement from someone who's in this field. What are the things that they might start with, or they might consider within their diversity, equity, and inclusion statement? And have you written one yourself? I'm just curious.
I haven't written a statement, but like all of my writing since 2014, I think I could just hand over my articles and my via and say,
Yeah.
there's pick one of these and take it as my evolving statement. I also want to add that that conference session that I gave in 2014, which marks like the formal, okay, notice of myself, like this is where I'm going and I'm learning as I go. I'm not finished. I wasn't finished then. I'm not finished now, but I'm doing the best I can with what I have and trying to, continue learning how to do this. It's been really important to me that I integrate teaching, research, and service, all of these together, because my commitment was not just to change my scholarly focus and not just to stay within this field, but to center focus, emphasis, respect for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice in everything that I do, personally, scholarly wise, service wise, teaching wise. I'm not going to fragment it and only do it like on a statement, only do it if I'm applying for something and now I have to think really hard about it. I'm trying to integrate it into a practice that I'm engaging. And that has been really helpful. And it's also helped me break through what I perceived earlier as barriers to how do I engage this. Once I decided I'm gonna center it in everything I do, I no longer have to like think about how am I going to add that in, or am I going to leave it out for this thing? It's just there, and I'm not saying it's there that I'm doing it perfectly in a way that people should necessarily follow. I'm saying that I'm committed to grappling with how to do it, and I'm hoping that I'm getting better at it. And I'm hoping that when for sure I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to grow, and later on say, I might have handled that differently if I were to do it now. But that's what growth and transformation is about, right? That you make your best effort, giving yourself the best opportunity to learn and do it, and then see how it works, take the feedback and the input, keep going. And if I keep going and get feedback or realize I'm taking a step in the wrong direction, okay, I'm going to adjust course and try things a little bit differently. But it's never-ending possibilities for how to engage.
Well, three things. Number one, can you hear me? I had problems with my microphone the other day. I noticed in recording, I listened to it, it sounded really light, but you can hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So I think I found the article that, or the presentation at ACT. Was it Field of Privilege? Why Instructional Design and Technology Must Engage Issues of Race, Ethnicity, and Social Issues. Presentation in Jacksonville.
That's right.
2014. So if anyone, I sent this link to everyone. You can download and take a look at all her work. Do you have colleagues now joining you in this effort, both either at Oklahoma or other places? Or did you start as kind of on your own and now have gotten you said maybe there's a special interest group at ACT, maybe there's maybe you have written grants with other people to pursue this further. What's happened in that regard of collaborative nature since 2014?
Well, what I didn't realize until 2014, the whole time, the years before that, where I was like struggling with, am I going to really like find a way to stay in this field, or am I going to have to start looking around and retool to do this?
Oh, that's right. You were saying you're thinking about leaving actually, or retooling or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but in 2013, the Minorities in Media Special Interest Group at AACT reorganized into the Culture, Learning, and Technology Division of AACT. And I didn't realize that that was happening in 2013, but when I went to give my presentation at 2014, it was via the CLT division that had been in place for just a year. So I've been very involved in interacting with that division and finding lots of connections. And I think people are more and more finding that division. And there's so many things to
Yes.
love about it and the people in it. One of the many things that I love about it is the emphasis on equitable interactions and improving practice to be more equitable and inclusive of people, not just looking at culture as this thing that we can collect and celebrate and, oh, look how fun, you know, in kind of an invasive or in a collecting kind of way, but that the culture, learning, and technology, that combination affords us and requires us responsibility of looking at how equity and inclusion are or not operating in what we're doing. So the emphasis is on whether you're looking at a study in a place other than the United States with a different cultural lens than in the United States. The CLT division itself is very interested in making sure that we're centering equity, inclusion, belonging.
Well, Shun Ga, one of your colleagues, who was your department chair, I think at that point,
yes.
and she wrote one of the letters to get me the Johnston Award. She's an old friend, very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
She is.
And she was the president of AECT this past year.
Right. She picked a fabulous topic for a theme for the conference that year. And I don't remember the exact wording of it, but it was culture, and it was very relevant. So I was very pleased with the work that she was doing, also related to bringing more awareness and engagement with these ideas at the AECT.
So I've got more questions for you, but I promised that I wouldn't ask too many before opening this up. And I think I need to start. Well, Aaron's got his mic open, so he might have a question to start with, but I know Claudia will jump. So Aaron, since your mic's open, do you want to jump in with a comment or a question?
Well, actually, I'm using a mic that has a secondary mute on it, but I'll ask a question, sure. So yeah, in educational research class I took last semester, we read a book on belonging and inclusion. And I was just wondering, belonging and self-efficacy. And I was wondering if you had done any research combining those two topics and what you think about that.
I have not done direct research combining those two topics, but self-efficacy, of course, is a standard in ed psych and in instructional psychology and technology. So I'd be open to that. This isn't the question that you asked, but it's bringing it to mind for me. One of the things that I've been really grappling with early on, and now I'm more just accepting that this is the way it's working, is that the ontological stance, the philosophical underpinnings of doing equity, inclusion, belonging, diversity work is not necessarily the same as what is the standard mainstream ontological stance or philosophical underpinnings of instructional design and technology as a field or STEM disciplines. So that grappling with and negotiating how do we do research and how do we do empirical research. So many of the ideas that we may think are, I'll just talk about myself, that I might initially think of like, okay, how do I do a study? How do I do a quick study that's efficient, that uses lots of numbers and is numerical and quantitative on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging topics? There's a mismatch there, right? Because the orientation of efficiency, the orientation of quantitative studies, the whole approach is not exactly matched. So it very quickly I understood that for me, I need to grapple with even the philosophical underpinnings that don't quite match. So I didn't find it very productive for me to jump right in and start doing empirical studies. So I'm interested in qualitative approaches, but I also felt like there's a lot of conceptual and philosophical work that needed to be done. I know that's not the question you asked.
No,
the answer to your question was no, I haven't.
Yeah, I was just also going to say, I'm the data manager for our college, and so as part of our retention, we're starting about we're talking about what type of data can we collect, at least on the front end, to know our students better, so that we're keeping some of these things in mind as we're both teaching and providing student services?
Great question.
Yeah.
He's right there on your campus, so.
You know, come on over, let's talk, because that there's a study in that, you know, like who do the people in power positions, like which you yourself are in, a decision-making position, where do we get our information for how we're going to make those decisions? Who can we be asking? And we probably should be asking the people who are most vulnerable to harm from our decisions. So that might be the participants who are from marginalized groups or vulnerable, you know, to harms outside the, you know, dominant, especially at OU, as you know, predominantly white institution. Most of the decision makers, most of the disciplines are predominantly white. Yeah, so that it might be, in addition to doing the reading, of course, but like what do marginalized populations, what do students that are underrepresented at OU, what do they want us to know? What do they want us to consider in the way that we're collecting data? And I also feel like I have to say that it's not fair just to put it on the students from marginalized groups to educate us. We need to be doing the thorough reading before we, you know, put all the.
Well, I agree. Just by asking the question, some people are going to self-select out of that type of questioning because of their position.
Right, and because of the fatigue. Yeah, it's just how much work do they need to do to educate us when there may be an easier way for us to find at least the start of an answer. I didn't answer that satisfactorily, but I appreciate the question.
It was more of a comment, so it's totally fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know, Amy, it reminds me that Michael Thomas, a former student in IST here, ended up first at Oklahoma, and being he liked it there, but family didn't fit in there. He has, you know, as you said, it's white predominant, and he has you know, his wife's Malaysian, he's African American, and he moved because of that, looking for a fit. I just saw him last week. I got to visit him at the University of Illinois at Chicago now, where he finally got tenure after I've written many letters of rec. After 4 or 5 different places, he finally got tenure, which is great because Michael's a superstar, actually.
He is. I agree with you.
You know, I also ran the Chicago Marathon with him long ago, when I could run faster and farther than I can now, but I'm persistent. And so we should go to Claudio. Claudio, you want to jump in here? And I'm sure you got a whole range of questions. Or
can I add one real quick thing before we end? Claudio, I cannot wait to hear your question, but I want to make sure that we're distinguishing, for whoever may be listening to this in the future, between whiteness as an ideology and white as a skin color. So when we talk about a predominantly white institution, it's predominantly people who are white, but they also, the institution also has, it manifests an ideology of whiteness that goes beyond just the color of the skin people here. So when you say folks like Michael or other people who happen to be at OU that find it perhaps not as accessible and supportive as other places might be, it's not that the people are white, it's the whiteness that is so thick, that it's the way of seeing and perceiving and being in the world that is not open to multiple perspectives and multiple experiences and multiple realities of what's going on. So sorry to interrupt that. Sorry, Claudio, can't wait here.
Claudio.
Yes, well, I think that it's very amazing, all the research that you are doing, and also just bringing awareness to that topic is just amazing because it's changing the world in so many aspects. So I have a question because when I go to Peru, I'm also involved in this non-profit organization. Some of the projects that we have, they try to incorporate a lot of education through use of devices. But whenever we have these activities, we try to choose projects that are based on long-term objectives. So because we think that it's not just about a one-time activity or a one-time experience for our students and for faculty. So when you have this type of research, how can you incorporate this research to have long-term interaction with the topic? Do you envision a way of just having this approach in your research or in your different talks that you are giving, that to motivate faculty or students to keep doing this, just not around a one-time experience, but something that is long-term probably?
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the question. And I think it goes back to, I should say that the articles that I've written lately, which are an article and mostly chapters, they have been responses to what I'm experiencing as an academic, as a professional, as an instructor in my classes, in my field, when I go to conferences. I'm grappling with issues as I'm experiencing them in the field. So I'm really writing for my students and other students out there, and for my colleagues, and for myself, I have to say. So I end up using a few of my articles in my Foundations of Learning Sciences, used to be called Intro to Instructional Technology course, because I am grappling with what's going on in our field and how might we modify our thinking about it. So absolutely, I'm invested in the connections and overlaps between my scholarly inquiry, my teaching, and my service, and my own growth and my learners' growth, and how we can continue to build and how my students can build. So it's always exciting to see when, it's such a luxury to have students reading these articles, and then the kinds of discussions that we can engage afterwards and the ideas that they get about. And if I can challenge people like, what can we do about this? And having people thinking about implications for professional practice, academic practice, how the design of different studies, our own practices as individual human beings, how we encounter other people, how we encounter information, how we bring that in. So I don't know if that answers the same question you were asking, but yeah, absolutely. I see this as so authentically what I'm thinking about and engaging in my work and in my life as a human being, not just in my role as a professor. I definitely want it to continue and grow beyond me.
Claudio, before you jump in here, is it possible, and you don't have to, if you want to turn your camera on so you can introduce yourself to, you maybe don't have a camera available, but.
I do. I'm just saying.
Hi.
Hello, how are you doing, Doctor?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think that is very important what you are saying, because we are, I'm working in this place where our students cannot graduate if they don't have certain number of service hours. So every year they have to have, for example, like 30 hours, and then the second year 60, and then 90, 120. That's
beautiful.
Populations, and we have programs such as like they need to go to, for example, Los Angeles and pretend to be homeless people for 72 hours, and then we just and we use technology just to monitor if they are okay through GPS, just to make sure that they are not going to kind of not very safe places. Mm-hmm. But thank you so much again for that.
Thank you.
So you talk about services and inroads and an eye-opening experience for you, your involvement in service for ACT, but also one can make inroads in their teaching practices. And I just read, I'm finishing grading my other class, and the second last paper, or the last one I read, had to do with culturally relevant pedagogy in Los Angeles. He's working on a grant proposal in mathematics area, but didn't have a lot of actual specifics that he was pointing to in his proposal. Gloria Lentz and Billings from Madison, from Wisconsin, he cited her work. That's where I went to school, actually. But he didn't have any, like I said, any or he didn't have a rich treasure of resources in his reference list. Are there books or resources that you look to or that you favor that you might want to recommend to my class that they might want to borrow from the library or buy or download for free?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to look to see what the titles are. I should have thought about that before the question was asked. I think On Belonging is one of them, and I'm sorry, I'm not. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is come up with a list and share it with you, that maybe you can amend this to add that. So Ibram Kendi's work is really invaluable on the not just being non-racist, but being anti-racist. So that framing is really helpful. You know, there's a, I'm hesitating to say it, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Ian Paper, I'm going to have to find this one too. There's a third university is possible. I'm not going to say this really well. I'm going to just stop myself and say, I'd like to give you a list that I can make sure I have the authors' names right. But there's, yeah, let me just pause right there.
Did you say the third university, mean the University of the Third Age?
No, I'm going to have to find it. So
okay.
In a minute, I'll look it up and I'll put it in the chat what the right thing is. But it's talking about how do you be an agent for equity and justice as an academic when the system is set up in a way that makes it really hard. So can you be a part of a system that is set up to be self-replicating and unjust in a lot of ways? Can you be a cog in the wheel that actually opens space to make things more just? Like how do we do that in our roles as academics? You know, how do we work in the system and also disrupt the most harmful aspects of the system? So there's a really interesting book that talks about ways you can engage that.
Yeah, I've got two pedagogy related books, but I'd say criticisms of both books is in the area of universal design for learning special ed and addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. In both of those, I could have done a better job of it. Which leads me to a follow-up. You teach a class like this. It's titled differently now. It used to be the same title. What other courses do you teach at Oklahoma, and which ones do you really look forward to teaching?
Right now, I'm doing a course called Critical Literacy, or Critical Literacies, depending on when I wrote it down. And I'm loving it. I designed it about 4 years ago when we had an online master's program, which we no longer have. Wait,
you got rid of the masters? Those are all growing. Why would you?
Right. Well, different circumstances that will take up a long conversation. Okay. So let me just say the critical literacies course was designed for a particular audience and mode, and I've reworked it so that it's now face-to-face and or hybrid mode with any students who want in, but primarily the College of Education. And I'm getting to teach it this semester, which I haven't taught for about 3 years. So I'm really excited about this because this is when I get to go very deeply into philosophical underpinnings, communication models and approaches, media literacy, critical pedagogy, logical fallacies. I get in all of this stuff, and I got to design it in a way that is a little unusual also for what our typical modes are. So I'm loving that. And I'm loving that this semester, all the students in it have had me for 2 or 3 other courses already program. So it's a very special group of people, the understanding of each other and the trust and the trusting communication and support, which holds people to a high standard, but also cuts people slack, that you can engage with people and struggle to say something what you're trying to say, and people can hear you while also giving you feedback about, like last night, dude, that sounds really offensive. Are you sure that's what you mean? What do you mean by that? That the students are engaging each other about these ideas in ways that the students have remarked to me repeatedly that it's an unusual kind of engagement with each other that we don't have enough of in most of our higher ed settings. Usually it's like, here's the information, very content focused. Here's the information, we're going to transmit it from the knowledge source to you, and then we're all going to go along. So it's really more transformation and critically pedagogy oriented.
Yeah, sounds like you would have fit in Wisconsin, because that's a lot of courses are of that ilk there.
Right.
And I'll ask you to send me the old, I maybe haven't designed the new version, but if you could send me the old version at Solus, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that. I'd rather send you the current. Oh, are you talking about critical literacies or
Yeah.
the IT foundations?
No, the critical literacies. Yeah.
I might, and I might have a conversation with you about it, because it might, a course may look different on paper than it is in practice.
So I'll throw something at you. It's pedagogically speaking. You taught a course like this. So 2 years ago, when I taught this course, we read Ali Carr's book, which is all the debate topics in the field. There's a point counterpoint kind of thing. And it's still there. It's an option. They could read that. But we had debates with Wayne State University students. They took the counterpoint, and my students took the lead role, or vice versa. And we use a tool called Nucleino, which is a free wiki-like tool. And then, 4 years ago, in 5 years, we were doing all this threaded discussions in Canvas and whatnot. And maybe the last time too, we were doing it, but I find those get convoluted, and they're good. It captures a lot of negotiation and people clarifying what they want to say, and it forces people to think on the fly oftentimes. And I've done research, a book on it in 1998, in fact, but I've gotten disappointed with online discussion forums for many reasons. And this semester we moved to individual/team blogs. So they have 4 to 6 people in a group. They individually blog. They have to give feedback to the other members of their group every week. And that has definite value in terms of lastingness, the longevity of that. People might struggle on the front end. Of those 3 approaches, debate approach, the discussion forum approach, and blog reflection approach, which of those have you tried, and which have you found the most beneficial?
Well, I haven't done the blog approach, but I have a very scaffolded approach to discussions in Canvas. So my scaffold is, you have to scroll down on the page to see everything that they need to do. Essentially, they get every week 3 or 4 articles to read, articles or resources to read, and then they have to post by, let's say this semester the class is on a Tuesday, so by the following Sunday they need to give their initial post, and I give them scaffolds like summarize the main points and contributions, link it to the course concepts, and they've got something like 60 concepts that we're exploring. And pose questions, and what's your gut reaction? What are you thinking about as you're reading this? What questions do you have about the reading or anything? And then everybody else is required to respond substantively to at least 3 other people's, and paying attention to people who haven't been posting. And then after that goes on for another week of the interactions back and forth, they need to come back and do a reflection on how their thinking may have changed since their initial post to now. And so scaffolding that, once they get used to what that dynamic and ebb and flow of it is, I have found that they are more interesting, substantive conversations online. And I'm happy to say that since it's a hybrid course and we actually do meet face-to-face or via Zoom synchronously, in addition to what's going on the discussion forums, we get to unpack some of those even further in the synchronous class sessions. So it does have the disadvantage of, once the course is over, once that Canvas course is locked down, they don't have access. So I do see the advantage of doing a blog type of thing.
Or a combination where you could print out the points in the Canvas that you appreciate and you want to save, and you post them within your blog.
Yeah,
that could be another option. There's all sorts of spin-offs and options here.
Yeah, there's also something about the closed group where only people in the class can see it. I think invites more risky kinds of conversations, and risky in a good way. Like I'm going to put something out there that I'm not I'm not sure I want to say in front of everybody, but I want to ask about, and people, can engage maybe more openly than they might if it were a blog post that anyone who has access could potentially be reading.
I started what's called the starter wrapper technique. Someone reads ahead and starts the discussion, and then someone else wraps it up and summarizes. And then you just change it. The same person becomes a moderator throughout the week and wraps it up. But there's a whole lineage of research. I think a philosophy professor in California somewhere was using this approach back in the late 90s when online forums started to become, I forgot his name now, he became famous for it. Anyways, I have 3 questions on articles you've written. I don't want to ask those. I want to go to Kevin first. We don't have much time left. I'm going to ask you about these, but Kevin, you want to jump in here and ask a question of Amy?
Hi, Kevin.
Certainly. Hi, thank you for joining us. It's been a very interesting conversation so far.
I'm glad to be here.
I am interested in service myself, so I spend a lot of hours, well, frankly, through the week, if not month, doing various service projects. And so as an academic, I'm not in the academic field at the moment, but as an academic, I'm interested in what services or what types of service that you do. So where, what kinds of opportunities do you find as an academic that seem valuable to you for service, and vice versa? What type of opportunities do you find less valuable for people to spend their time on?
Really good question. So the longer this is my 24th year at OU, so I've been, hopefully I'm learning some things, as I'm here. I'm trying ever more to do service that is really meaningful to me and that I can make a really meaningful contribution. And if both of those aren't met, there's too much service to be done for me to do it all. So I'm trying to stick really close to that. And even this year, I'm modifying that to say it's not enough that I can make a particular contribution, because lots of people can make particular contributions. It really needs to fit in with me being able to learn from it and able to apply things in other ways, and or like really make a contribution that maybe I'm uniquely positioned for, if that's even possible. But an example of this is I've been involved with the Faculty Senate for many years. And I've just finished last May my role as Faculty Senate Chair. And so in the years leading up to that, all the years that I've been on the executive committee through 3 different presidents of the university, and we're now with our 3rd provost, and in my own college, we've had 3 deans since I've been here. My focus on thinking about equity, inclusion, belonging, diversity, equity, in my scholarly activity, in my service, and in my teaching, also particularly has been meaningful and authentic in the work that I've been doing with the Faculty Senate over the years in various positions. So it's not enough to say we need equity at this university. So working with lots of different organizations and individuals and committees to okay, how do we make it more equitable? What's the data we need to have access to? How are we going to get that access? How are we going to persuade leadership that this isn't just a soundbite, that this is something that needs to be done for the good of the institution, not just for the good of people who are not included, but for all of us. So that's been super meaningful for me, looking at everything from salary inequities across lots of different lines, and issues working with student groups and in combination with staff. Last year, they were going to change our benefits package so that the people at the lowest end of the pay scale were going to be having the highest increase in the monthly cost of their benefits. Those kinds of things, those are very real and meaningful and impactful for everybody in the community. So using the position with the Faculty Senate in combination with other organizations to how do we communicate without just fighting? How do we find a way to actually address this that is more equitable, that also lets the university continue? So that's again, I've learned a ton, and we, in combination with a lot of other committed people, we've been able to do some good things, which doesn't mean there's not many more good things that still need to be.
There's always a long list.
Yes. Yeah, I
Thank
don't know
you.
if I answered the question or not, but
Yes, no, that's great information. I appreciate it.
there's so many places to put it into practice. And, you think, I will speak for myself, I think I know some things, and then I get in the real situation to try it, and wow, the things I learn, wow, yeah. So being open to what we don't know is really important.
That is always what surprises me when I get into things.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm sorry I saw you had a note in the chat window there. I hope you weren't waiting to ask for too long.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Aaron, I want to go back to you because you're on the campus there at Oklahoma. You want to put your video on for a second so she recognizes you when you passes you on campus? Oh, you're a tree.
Oh, beautiful.
Okay.
Hi, Aaron. Nice to see you.
You're muted, Aaron. Somehow we don't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I lost connection, and all of a sudden I was muted twice. So I'm back.
Looks beautiful. Is that trees in Oklahoma behind you or a different place?
No, they're from Arkansas, where I grew up.
Do you have
Yeah.
any follow-ups before we end tonight, Aaron?
I don't think so. Yeah, if you don't mind me contacting you, if we're going to start building that survey, if I could get some of your advice.
Sure, I don't mind at all. I appreciate it. I hope it's okay that I'm going to do this. I'm putting a link in the chat from some of my recent publications. There's about 4 chapters, and along with the article that you pulled me in for, the Reconsidering.
Oh, great. So you got a Best Pepper Award. Congratulations.
Yeah, 4 of my last 5 have been recognized with awards. So I'm gratified that may help extend the conversation around some of the topics.
Excellent. And, in fact, the first one that's listed there, I got circled just to ask you about it just briefly. The reframing interdisciplinarity towards equity and inclusion, and Brad Hokinson's and Maria Exeter's book. So that's come out then. The book is out and the chapter is out, and you can send. Is that link a link to a preprint or? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know how long it'll be up there, but
yeah,
for the moment,
that's exactly what I was going to ask for. So you just
yeah.
Okay, that's great. So that's one thing. You have 2 articles that you're not first author on, but I'm curious because they're one with she and one with Shan on prompts. So my dissertation was computer prompts in writing, using question prompts to support ill-structured problems in solving online peer collaborations, and then the other effective web-based question prompts and scaffolded knowledge integration and ill-structured problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a strand of yours?
Pardon me?
Is that a strand of theirs or yours or both of yours?
It's a strand that they were interested in and that fits in with my scaffolding critical thinking. There was enough overlap between our interests, and also Dr. Guh has worked extensively in this area as well, and she was on both of their committees and was invaluable. Those were both dissertation studies, and I was delighted to have them both as my doc advisees. And they're both superstars.
I thought they were dissertation. It sounds like a dissertation, actually. So, I figured you were probably the advisor, or at least on the committee of each one of those. So, yeah, it's great to see, because again, that was my early interest as well, and I'm glad to see people are pursuing it. You have another article that's called "Becoming Fully Human in Professional Roles." I have a human learning and human development double major as a background. I'm always interested in human development issues in our field because they're way underrepresented in terms of the research that's out there. People don't look at the whole human being. We tend to look at that little piece of the learning environment, and not thinking about there's a new area called person-centered instruction or belongingness-centered. I'm reading about this, a lot more focus on belongingness and person-centeredness. And so what's this article written from? What perspective? Becoming fully human in our professional roles.
So that
Women's
was
voices.
published in 2016, and that is in the book that Anna Donaldson edited, which is Women in Instructional Technology, Our Journeys, Women in Instructional Technology. I may be getting the title a little bit wrong. And that was an invitation from Anna, Anna and I are friends from a long time back. And she has been observing my shift over the years. So she knew me before I shifted focus. You know, my early focus when she first met me was on visual literacy and visual communication to support learning and not hinder our ability to learn, right? And I still love that area. But she knew me as I was like struggling with how do I stay in this field? How do I, do this work? And how do I turn my focus so that I'm centering equity and inclusion, and how can I deal with this in my work? And so she knew about my presentation in 2014 that I mentioned, and the work that I did in the follow-up and the different conversations we had at professional organization at AACT and in other settings. So she was very familiar with the changes I was making in my focus and attempting to make in myself, and the integration of the teaching, research, and service. And she thought it was very interesting. And so she wanted a chapter from me about that evolution to be in that Women in Technology book. So that's what that chapter is about me struggling with making the turn. Like, how do I go from where I am? And, the requirement of the book was that it needed to be somewhat autobiographical, which, I'm an introvert and I don't like putting all my stuff out there for everybody. So there's some grappling in that chapter about, okay, I'm going to be, open with some stuff because it's actually necessary for understanding the way I'm approaching or making that shift. So I think it's an interesting thing that it came out in 2016. As I was, some of the articles that came out later than that, there are ideas I didn't know what to do with this stuff. So between about 12 and 16, I was doing a lot of writing. When you write, you have the opportunity to really communicate with yourself, to really explore ideas that you're having. And so a lot of the writing that ended up being in specific chapters was rolling around on my computer in various files and in my head. I had to kind of catch up with where I was trying to go. And so I don't know if I'm saying that very clearly.
Oh, exactly.
They became chapters later. Yeah. But at the time, that's kind of the stuff that Anna knew I was grappling with when she asked that.
I remember she's holding the book in her hand at ACT the first time it was made available for anybody. I was sitting a couple of steps away from, I've known about that book and I recommended it right away to folks, to my grad students and to others. So I'm glad you have a chapter in that because, I think it won an award at ACT. The book did. Yeah. And Anna's, as you all don't know, but as Amy knows, Anna had a stroke and has started to recover. And she was at AACT, was there in attendance. So it was good to see.
And wish her only the very best.
Exactly. And, she's a lovely person who's really supportive of everyone in the field. So if anyone goes to ACT in the future, go to Breakfast with Champions, which she organizes among various folks. And it's always enjoyable.
That's her brainchild. Yeah.
Yeah, they're maybe move it to a brunch instead of a 7 o'clock in the morning, but we'll see.
We'll get different faces there, maybe.
Yeah, David Wiley has promised in his announcement as the incoming president that he'll consider moving the time and many other things, including finalizing the schedule a little earlier, because that was a huge problem this year, was people didn't know what's what, and getting people get feedback sooner and other things that he'll do it. I mean, I know Dave, I've known him for a long time, and
I
if he
heard him
says,
say, take a screenshot of this timeline. We're gonna watch
Yeah.
me do it.
oh, you were attending virtually then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's been a joy to have you in here, Amy,
Thank you.
and to hear your perspectives and to get you to send us that secret list in Google Documents,
It
which
may not be there very long.
so everyone, I'll quickly grab that and I'll share that with the class right after, and then I'll make sure that people are aware that it's just for us. But truly, it's been great. You really opened my eyes up, and I think everyone who asked questions here had something that could link to immediately in their own practices and their own perspectives. So thank you very much. Everyone, if you want to give Amy 3 words in the chat window or a round of applause, I'm going to end this recording. You'll be with us. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Let me first say thank you, though, so much for the opportunity. I really love talking through the ideas with everybody.
So you got the last word.